In this module, what we'll do is that we'll have a look at the overview of the phase 3. We'll look at developing what is called the action plan. We'll look into barriers and facilitators that operate in this phase. And we also have a brief look at other tools and techniques that might be helpful. So, when the career counselor and client have worked through all the information gathered, consolidated and clarified, and have shared some sort of understanding of the client's story and issues, and made some decisions about potential career goals, as well as potential goals for the counseling session itself, the counseling process can effectively shift toward action planning. So here is an overview of the broad action planning phase, okay? With the work of the client and counselor, including the techniques and strategies that are commonly used at this phase. Remember to read chapter 9 and 10 of your textbook in relation to this module, as well as the next week module. Okay, so basically at this stage, it is the client's responsibility to engage in brainstorming of possibilities as they work with the counselor. So the client will be assisted to develop an action plan for the immediate and also longer term future based on realistic assessment of available options, opportunities and resources, and finally to implement the action plan and take some active agentic step in real life. Okay, so on the other hand, to facilitate action planning for clients, counselors engage in a variety of initiatives at this phase. They need to make sure that the client relies on her or his resources and interests and skills in a realistic and achievable way. This means that, for example, if clients need encouragement and they have not realized some of their interests or skills, counselors help them acknowledge those areas of strength. And also if the opposite is the case, if there is a mismatch between clients' values, skills and abilities and the desired goals, career counselors need to highlight these for the client in a tentative, reflective and exploratory way based on what they have heard from the client so far. To engage clients in such processes, counselors can continue to use a variety of qualitative career assessment tools as they become needed or when they become needed. And many of such qualitative career assessment tools are embedded within what we know of as narrative career counseling and as strength-based counseling techniques that you became familiar with in the previous modules and last week. However, counselor may also need to help the client to cope with current problems by assisting in the learning of new skills. These skills may be related to networking capacities, writing or speaking skills, computer skills, or many other things, and often these might be achieved through new courses or workshops or making required referrals to other people. Sometimes a client at this stage might really benefit from learning about a new field or a complete new understanding about a particular career that is linked to a number of fields, and as such is an interdisciplinary area that new career that this person could potentially enjoy or benefit from. In such instances, networking with other professionals who are working in similar areas really helps. Okay, so considerations for phase 3 action planning. The action plan that eventually evolves as a result of such activities and processes needs to be concrete and specific. Remember that to achieve a concrete and a specific action plan, we need to look back at the previous processes of decision making and goal setting with this client. If in those previous phases, clear career goals with their possible consequences, facilitators and barriers were all discussed and identified with the client, things now will be much more easily achievable. Okay, at this stage, things will be more easily achievable. For example, if in phase 2, Maria's career goal was identified as wanting to become a senior project manager at a large multinational company. Okay, so this is the client's goal. We also need to know the possible consequences, facilitators, and barriers that might emerge for Maria as she moves towards that goal. What could be in the way of her goal? Both short-term and long-term considerations. What could be? What could help her and make this transition easier over the next couple of years for her? Who will be there to support Maria throughout this next couple of years? What does she need at this point in time to begin that journey? What is missing in her life? How much of the path has already been covered? What sort of steps has she already taken? Completing these types of explorations before starting an action plan is essential. So we assume that when you start action planning, you've already done some of these. However, just like general counseling goals, a career plan needs to be seen as an ever-evolving process, okay? Although we can characterize the planning part or action phase as the last part of the 3-part process, it is more accurately a continuous process or loop in which you may be working simultaneously on all 3 phases. Maria might share with you, for example, she might share with you a new piece of information at this stage, okay? And then you spend some more time to explore this new area in her life and what it means for her career goal. So you may go back to phase 1 and then phase 2 again before you can continue your work in phase 3. So, whilst the idea of action planning is something that is often considered as relevant for the end of the career counseling process, it is also important to be mindful that the counseling process from the start is leading towards this phase, this step. In many ways, the fact that the client arrives for career counseling in the first place is the first step of their action plan, okay? They have already taken action. Any activities or tasks that are undertaken throughout the counseling process in your sessions are also ostensibly a part of an overall action plan, okay? It's important to have in mind that how individuals best work towards their goals is always linked with their preferences and individual contextual and cultural elements. What works for one person may not be effective for another. So have that in mind. Actions are an expression of personal attitudes and aptitudes and a way for people to generate change in their lives. Okay. Nonetheless, as we progress through counseling, career goals are refined and a sense of readiness evolves. Okay. This is in terms of engaging in some form of formal action planning. Okay. In most cases, there's a focus on helping the client to develop new understanding about their self and their environment and to assume responsibility for their actions. Although this is generally the case, there are also situations where social action and advocacy need to be implemented. Sometimes part of the action plan may involve the client being referred onto another service or the career counselor making some other inquiries on behalf of the client. Okay, action plans are not only about self-directed and autonomous tasks, have that in mind, but sometimes, often, will include seeking additional support or advice from others, networking or any kind of socializing possibilities. In any case, it's important for the career counselor to remain the facilitator of reflection that would lead to action and not become too much a part of the action plan themselves. Okay, so it's not for you to exactly tell people what is the actions that they need to take. Our purpose as career counselor is always to empower the client to be able to manage their own career development into a future in which they can live new stories of possibilities. So we don't want to dance with the danger of creating unhelpful and unnecessary dependence within the client. Some clients may require more direct input and advocacy. Let's say, for example, examples might be clients with disability or clients who have gone through disadvantaged or marginalized in society. However, if a client doesn't come to experience self-efficacy in making those decisions and is not taking the necessary actions, then we ultimately fail them. It's a matter of balancing out what is really needed with the capacities of the clients who we are working with. Okay, let's have a look at a realistic approach to action planning. Being realistic in how we approach an action plan is really important. Action plans are rarely smooth sailing and carried out exactly as imagined. If the client isn't prepared for this, they can experience demotivation and be discouraged from continuing the process of counseling. So it's important to prepare clients for this through the planning stage, right from the beginning when we start. It's also not uncommon for resistance to emerge as people move toward action. This resistance can be the result of clients and counselors moving at different speeds, or there might be uncertainties and fears about how the action plan can be put into effect. Therefore, it's important for the client and career counselor to consider the factors that might both support and hinder the client in carrying out the action plan. Exploring these factors, identifying ways of navigating around obstacles while drawing on supports will definitely help the client to engage successfully in the action planning. For example, Morgan and Maglio, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, they researched individuals' experiences in implementing career action plans. They found the following to be important factors that had a positive impact on implementation of action plans. Some of these are listed here as personal attitude, self-knowledge, support from others factor, the capacity for flexibility, having goal clarity, but also broader perspectives, and finally, financial resources. On the other hand, they also found that low levels of motivation, negative emotions, lack of experience or skill, health issues, problems with the system, financial difficulties, and a general lack of support within people's environment, which is also another systemic issue, I would say, were all factors that hindered putting action plans into motion. What happens when action plans come before career goals? It might also be the case that an action plan needs to be developed in order to facilitate the client in being able to make a career goal. If there are several unknowns still present for the client, it might be that the client needs to set a preliminary goal of being able to make a decision. That is, they have identified that they can't set a clear career goal yet because they need to undertake other actions first. For example, the client might need to engage in some more in-depth exploration or information seeking or talking to others in order to clarify what possibilities exists or are realistic for them. This is the case with Maggie, a case example that we'll have a look. To help Maggie clarify her interests and values, she and her career counselor decided to use an interest inventory and values card sort exercise. So these are some qualitative career assessment tools. As Maggie developed further self-understanding, she was able to clarify a plan of action by stating something like this. In 6 months, I would like to have a job that allows me to have more opportunities to use my verbal and computer skills. I want to work more independently and have more control over my success. I also want a job with more income potential that offers opportunities for advancement into higher levels of management. Okay, so Maggie and her career counselor began the process of identifying prospective occupational options related to these interests, values, and skills, the ones that were just mentioned in this excerpt. Based on this exploration, Maggie came to the tentative conclusion that maybe a career in computer sales offered her the opportunity to express her most important preferences and characteristics. So to gather more information about computer sales position, Maggie and her counselor, they both decided and agreed that informational interviewing would be, a useful pathway for her. So an informational interview or informational interviewing is an informal conversation with someone working in an area that interests you, who might give you some information and advice, or just tell you about their career story and their progress in that position, and generally let you know about how to navigate your career in that field in order to get there, and how it could be the same way for you, or couldn't be the same way. It's an effective research tool, basically, in addition to exploring the internet or reading books or articles and examining job descriptions. So it's a really proactive approach. But sometimes action plans might reveal something new. As Maggie and her counselor reviewed the steps involved in informational interviewing, it became evident to the counselor that Maggie had difficulty reaching out to experienced people. The counselor had used scaling questions to help Maggie clarify her understanding of what was required and her confidence in carrying out the interview. So here is a brief conversation between counselor and Maggie. So the counselor begins by, Maggie, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is totally confident and 1 is not at all confident, how do you feel about your ability to do this interview? Maggie says, maybe about 4. Counselor goes, so I was wondering, what are the things that are holding you back from being more confident? Maggie goes, well, I'm not sure. I would be able to get over my shyness. I'm a bit of a ditterer when it comes to conversations, especially when it's about asking for help, or if the person seems like really, together. As a result of such conversations and curiosities from the counselor and Maggie decided that it would be helpful to first focus on developing assertiveness skills, because these are essential for effective interviewing, obviously, if she wants to gather some occupational information from people with more work experience. Later on, these assertiveness skills obviously could also help her for actual job interviews. So Maggie and her counselor engaged in assertiveness skill training with role play practice together in 1 or 2 sessions. Or this could be something that Maggie could go away and just research possibilities for workshops or other practices that she could do on her own. So soon Maggie was ready to begin informational interviewing. A friend of a friend actually worked in a computer and software sales, and Maggie thought that this person could be a good starting point for her informational interviewing. They met for a 30-minute interview, during which Maggie received lots of answers to many of her questions pertaining to work as a salesperson in the IT fields. At the end of that interview, Maggie asked for names of other computer salespeople with whom she could meet, and then more about possibilities and options. Before she could schedule her second informational interview, her first interviewee learned of a vacancy in his company. He recommended Maggie for the position, and she was offered an interview after she applied. So there you go. You see how things might evolve for people in this kind of a phase for action planning and clarifying of career goals.